So while I'm here in the test environment, we're going to go ahead and create a new EPAF. Again, as I said before, we're going to log in using our user ID, which is our banner ID number. And so I'm going to type that in. And then we're also going to use our 6-digit PIN, which again, for most of us is going to be the 2-digit month, 2-digit day, 2-digit year of your birthday. And again, if you need help with that, you can go ahead and contact TAC and they can reset that for you. So now I'm going to go ahead and log in. And you'll notice that it doesn't take you to the EPAF menu immediately. You'll need to navigate over here to Employee. And there's different options. This is just like self-serve, different areas that you can look at and get some information, biographical information for yourself. But at the bottom here of the Employee tab is the Electronic Personal Action Form, EPAF. So I'm going to click here. And again, more options that you have available to you for some of the actions that you can take while you're in here. I'm going to create a new EPAF today. So here in the new EPAF area, you're going to have to designate what employee it is that you are working with. You have the option of entering a banner ID here if you know it, or you can come over here and you can type in a name and then use the little magnifying glass to search for that individual. I'm going to use myself as an example. So I'm going to put my last, add my last name here, my first name. Again, you have some different options for searching for the individual. Again, ID number here, Social Security number. Last name generally works alone as well. And there I am. I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And you'll notice that it populates it back here on the main screen. Your query date is a very important date, and you need to make sure that you are selecting a date that is appropriate for when you want this PAF to be applied. If you have any issues on what kind of query date to choose, you may contact HR or you can contact payroll, and they can help you determine what is the most appropriate date. Most query dates are going to start on the Saturday after a payroll for B1s or the Saturday prior if it's a B2. But again, you can contact payroll or HR to determine what the appropriate query date is. I am going to use the date of 11/9, which is the Saturday following a pay period. And I have actually made a mistake here, but it's kind of a nice spot to point it out. Notice that I have only used the 2-digit year, and the system does not like that. And so it will not let you move forward unless you change this to the 4-digit year. So you need to make sure that you choose that appropriately. Because I am a super user, I have a pretty long list of paths that are available to me. You notice I've got several instances of the same one, and that's because I have access to all of the paths across all of the different divisions of the university. Most of you will not have this long of a list. You will only have the ones that are available to you within a specific division: academic affairs, admin and finance, and so on. What I am going to do here is I'm going to choose the type of path that I want to complete, and we do not have all paths available out there currently. As you can see, we have some overload paths that are available for faculty and adjuncts. We have the different summer paths that are available. We have a change in pay, a FOP and index change, release time index FOP change, terminate, temporary employee or temporary assignment, not employee assignment, a supervisor change, and a title change, and then we also have a revision. I am going to choose one that kind of hits all of the different notes of a path, so I am going to choose a faculty adjunct overload. And you'll notice that there is a C behind it that designates the area. So for anyone in academic affairs, you're going to see a C that follows your path that you've chosen. It tells you about what I currently have out there right now. And I'm happy with this. This is the correct date. I know this is the query date I want to use. Name's been populated up here, so I'm going to go ahead and hit go. Okay, so this particular path, I'm creating an overload for an individual. So in doing that, you're going to be creating a brand new job. So I don't want to have this line where it says Disbursements Manager. I don't want to have that toggled, because what that would do is it would create a new entry on that particular job, and that is not what we want to do. We need to create a completely separate job. So I'm going to go up here and select this blank line, and now I'm going to have to fill in some information. Using the criteria as established by Academic Affairs, I know that an O3 position is a overload for a staff member, so I'm going to populate that, and you'll see that automatically populates adjunct faculty teaching overload. And so at this point in time, I'm also going to need to choose a suffix. And in choosing a suffix, you will need to access certain parts of Banner. And I'm talking about Internet native Banner, so production Banner. So I'm going to come back here to my MyFSU status. I'm going to come back to Home, pull up my admin pages for Banner, and I'm going to pull up NBA jobs. Not all of you are going to see that, but okay. So I'm going to type in my Banner ID, and there's my name. And now I'm going to look at all of the different positions that I have available. One trick that I have always followed is to use 01, 01, 06. This is going to take you way back in Banner, and it's going to give you just about the full history of any individual that you're looking up. This just tells Banner how far back you want to look. So now I'm going to click on the ellipses here, and I'm going to say, please go to NBA JList. Okay, so here's a list of all of the positions I have ever had since I have been here at Ferris. And you'll notice that you don't see anything with an 03 in front of it. So I've never had an 03 position. So going back to my EPAF, that means that the suffix I am going to choose is going to be 00. Now, if I did have an 03 position in the past, and that 03 position, I'm going to navigate back here to Banner again, had a 00 already, then the next suffix I would choose would be 01. And you would use that logic as you move forward. For many of you in academic affairs, specifically with an overload path, you're going to have individuals who have multiple O positions. So you'll need to make sure that you're using the appropriate suffix in sequence for them. So I'm going to change this back to a 0. This is the only pieces that I have to populate for here. So I'm going to go ahead and hit go. All right, so you'll notice there's my name and my Banner ID. I don't have any information populated here in the transaction or transaction status. We do have that query date that we populated, 11/9 of 2019. And as I mentioned before, that date populates throughout this path. And it tells me what type of path it is that I'm trying to create. So this doesn't look too different from a path that we're normally used to filling out in a paper path. Your job begin date needs to be reflective of your effective date. So I'm going to put 11/9 of 2019. I'm going to put my effective date, again, the same as our date above, 11/9/2019. And now your personnel date. Your personnel date needs to be actually reflective of the day that the individual starts work. This is a record-keeping date. It doesn't derive anything in Banner. So this is a date that's probably going to be the start date of your classes. So I'm going to put 8/26/2019. I believe that's the start date for this last fall semester. Contract type and job status are already populated for you, and you don't need to go ahead and worry about those. Now your FTE. This will be based on what is calculated for your individual departments. We're just going to pretend that I'm taking a 3-credit overload, so a 0.25 FTE. Appointment percentage, again, this is auto-populated, so you don't need to worry about that. Here, you're going to have to do a little bit of math. So what you will need to do to figure out your hours per day and your hours per pay is you're going to have to multiply 0.25 times 80 hours. And what that comes to pull up my calculator here. So 0.25 times 80. That gives me 20 hours per pay. And if I want to know the number of hours per day, I just move that decimal over. So I have 2 hours per day, 20 hours per pay. And now I'm going to move that off. So that's what I'm going to populate here. 2 hours per day, 20 hours per pay. My job change reason, that's auto-populated. I don't need to change that. And pays and factors, these are auto-populated. These may change depending on the type of path that you are doing. If you have any questions regarding this, feel free to contact payroll and they can help you decide if this is a line that you need to change at all. Okay, so now I'm going to put my annual salary in here and just a regular overload pay. Oh wait, they got to raise this year. Okay, so that's the total amount of pay that I should be receiving for this overload. Timesheet org. This is where my check normally gets delivered to, and that is the disbursements office. Supervisor ID is not a required field, so you do not need to fill this out. Notice that it doesn't have a red star here, so I don't necessarily have to include that. As I mentioned before, that 11/9 date populates in several different areas across the path, and here you'll see it again, 11/9 of 2019, and again down here, 11/9 of 2019. Those dates should remain the same. You don't need to make a change to those. Now I'm going to tell it the type of FOAP that I want it to charge to. You'll notice that when I retyped that index that nothing else changed. Before you can make a change to this, you're going to have to go down here and hit default from index. So I'm going to go ahead and click this. It's going to kick me all the way back up to the top of the screen again, and notice I have an error message here, but that's okay. We don't need to worry about that quite yet. So I'm going to scroll back down here to my FOAP area, and you'll notice that the rest of my FOAP has populated, all except for my account code. So I'm happy with this FOAP structure, but I need to tell it what type of account code to put in here. So there, I've done that. And then I can come over here and I can change my percentage if I need to. Sometimes we have faculty members or staff that are split between different areas and they're paid for by different areas. And this is where you would add another FOAP at the bottom, tell it you wanted 50%, 25%, however you want that structure to work. But for now, I'm happy with what I have here. So I'm going to save and add new rows. And you'll notice no more error message. You will always get that error message the first time you click on default from index and the index gets populated because it wants you to populate this account code. It's kind of a good reminder to come back down here and populate the account code. Okay. So this area can be a little bit deceiving. There's some pieces of it that we need to populate and some pieces that we don't. The effective date, we do need to populate. And this date, again, needs to reflect this 11/9 date. So I'm going to go ahead and add that there. And then the earnings code, this is a teaching overload, so that's what I'm going to put here. And then hours or units per pay. And we determined that up here. Remember when we had to do our math? So we already know the answer to that, and that's that 20. So we're going to go ahead and populate that here. Now, that is all we need to do for this area. We don't need to worry about deemed hours. We don't need to worry about special rate, shift, or an end date. All of that can remain blank, and you can go ahead and move down to the next area. I like to hit save and add new rows. Doesn't really matter about the add new rows, but I like to hit save just to be in a good habit of saving my work, just like if I were working in Microsoft Word. Okay, so I've saved my work. So now I'm going to come back down here again. There's my FOAP structure. There's my earnings code that I've populated. Okay, so we've told the system what kind of employee we have. We've told it how we want to pay them, how much we want to pay them, where the account needs to be, what we need to label it, and now we need to end the job. So for your job end date and your job effective date, these two dates need to be the same, and these two dates need to be a payroll Friday. So for a fall semester pay, we're going to choose 12/20 of 2019, and that is the last pay for the fall semester. And again, if you need help determining these, you can always contact payroll or someone in HR, and we can help you determine what the appropriate pay end effective date needs to be. Personnel date, just like above, needs to be reflective of the actual date that the person will no longer be working. So I believe the 16th is the last day of classes for the semester. Our job status, T stands for terminated, and that's auto-populated, so you don't need to fill that in. And again, job change reason, that one's also auto-populated, and you don't need to change that as well. Okay, so finally, we've defined our job. We told it what we wanted it to pay, how long we wanted to pay it for. So now what we need to do is we need to get our approvers on here. And this is our routing queue. And the routing queue will be different for all different types of paths. For this particular one, we have College Reviewer, Dean of Academic Affairs Reviewer. And so we need to populate all of these. These are all required, and you won't be able to save or move your path on any further until you have these populated. And if you'll notice when you come over here, there's different approvers available, or there's different actions that are happening over here. Some of these people are approving, which means they're putting their stamp of approval on it, and some of these people are just FYIs. An FYI status means that this person can see the path, but they do not need to approve it, and they do not hold up the approval process. But this is a good way for, say you have an individual that needs to have access to this path, but maybe doesn't need to approve it, but should probably have it in their history so that if they have to reference it later on, they can. This is a good way to add them to a queue so that you're able to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and quickly add these individuals. And as you notice, I just had a pop-up screen there that kind of disappeared back behind my screen. And in order to find it, I'm just going down here and I'm going to pull it back up. College Reviewer. Since I used to work in arts and sciences, I'm going to go ahead and pick Chris Swank. And Academic Affairs Dean. This wants to throw that screen over there, so I'm going to choose Christy Hake. And for Academic Affairs Reviewer, I'm going to choose Kim Wilbur. And again, like I said, not all PAFs will have all of these approvers. This particular type of PAF requires all these approvers. Okay, so here I am in Human Resources, and you'll notice there's several names that you can choose from here. You can choose any one of these names, and it will get approved. So it doesn't really matter who you choose. I just always kind of like to create work for Jennifer Wallace, so I'm going to go ahead and choose her. And position control, you'll notice that Charlotte Bongard is listed here and Lisa Start Spinner. Best practice is to always choose Charlotte. Lisa is really her backup, so as a rule of thumb, I always choose Charlotte. And payroll, again, you see a lot of names listed here. Any one of these individuals you can choose because we can all proxy in for one another. I'm not going to choose myself to approve a PAF for myself, so I'm going to choose Carla. And super user. This is going to be the same list from payroll as a super user. And you can choose any one of these. We can proxy in as one another, so I'm going to choose Carla again. Okay, so there I've established my routing queue. Now, say you want to have a department chair see this PAF, but you don't need their approval. So we're going to come over here and Department Academic Affairs. This is going to give us a list of all of our department chairs. And so I am going to choose Scott Cohen. He needs to see this. So there I've chosen Scott Cohen. And I'm going to come over here and I'm going to make him an FYI. And as I mentioned before, him listing as an FYI does not stop the approval flow. It just puts him in here so that he can see it and he can acknowledge it, but it doesn't slow down your approval process. I'm going to go ahead and hit save and add new rows. Again, it takes me back up to the top again. I'm going to scroll through, and you'll notice that Scott's been moved to the top, and that's determined by these numbers here. It just puts them in numerical order. All right, finally we're at the comments box. Just going to teaching overload for COM 101. And you can put anything you need to in comments. Again, the comment box really isn't limited. You could probably go on for days here. So you can include any information that you feel is pertinent or is required by possibly academic affairs or whoever else is in the approval queue. So I am happy with my information here. Just going to give it a once over again. I'm happy with all the information that I've provided. So now I'm going to hit save one more time. Takes me up to the top. Notice that it's telling me your change was saved successfully. We don't have any errors, which would show up right here. I don't have any errors. So I'm happy with my PAF, so I'm going to go ahead and hit submit. And there I get my transaction has been successfully submitted. Now, a lot of times you will receive these these warnings right here, IPED's reportable. That's just an indicator for HR and not necessarily anything you need to worry about. And as a rule of thumb, anything that is listed as a warning is just that. It's just a warning. It's not going to stop your PAF from moving forward. If you were to receive an error in this same area, that would keep your PAF from being submitted, and you would need to figure out, the error would probably give you some description as to what information was missing that you needed to correct, or maybe you had a formatting issue. Maybe instead of putting 2019 down here, you only put 19. It would give you an indication as to where that error was located and then how you would need to fix that in order for you to submit successfully. So at this time, this PAF has been submitted successfully. We have our indicator up here. And the couple things I want to point out before I close this out is Once you have submitted your PAF successfully, you are going to be receiving a transaction number. You can use this number to track your PAF. So when you're back in the EPAF main menu, you can look in the search area and you can use that transaction number to search up the PAF that you've just created. Again, this here, the transaction status, it's saying pending. So that means that it's waiting in an approval queue somewhere. If we scroll back down here, it is probably going to be, it's going to go to Scott Cohen's approval queue, but it doesn't require his approval because, again, he's an FYI. So it's probably sitting in Chris Swank's approval queue waiting for her to approve it to move it forward. So there we have successfully completed and submitted our very first EPAF.